But if you cast your mind back to the 16th of April 2025, something really awful happened for trans people. The Supreme Court ruling, which ruled on the meaning of woman and sex purely within the Equality Act 2010, or if you read a lot of the right-wing media, you'll probably be led to believe that it affects all laws, but it doesn't, because it clashes with lots of other laws, such as the Gender Recognition Act 2004, or the Human Rights Act. So there's lots of areas that it actually affects and clashes with, but that's still all rumbling on. And following on from that, there's been lots of pressure and bullying that's gone on from people who are called gender criticals, so people who are anti-trans, basically anti-trans hate groups, have been pressurizing a lot of groups, particularly women's groups, into bullying them into being trans exclusive, and this is still going on. But coming on from that, something really beautiful happened. And a group of women stood up and said, actually, this is not happening in our name. We don't want this to happen, because we want to be inclusive. And they actually formed a collective called NION Women Collective. And I'm happy to say that I've got two of their founder members with me today. I'm just going to refer to them by their first names because of all the hate that I get. I don't want them to get the same amount of hate that I get. And I know I'll get a ton of hate for this, but it goes right over my head because I don't read those comments anyway. So there we go. So welcome, Emma and Jackie.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands. We like jazz hands. Yeah. So I'm going to go to Emma first of all. So thanks both of you for joining me. So Emma, would you like to tell me a little bit about NION Women Collective?
Yeah, so it did really start by one person having a thought over breakfast of like, what can we do? How can we challenge what is happening right now? And Claire then contacted a group of others who were close-knit friends, and I was part of that, to say, what do you think of this idea? Are you in? What can we do? And it kind of went from there with the thought of how can we get this message out that actually in this conversation, trans people and particularly trans women are being used as scapegoats, are being used as a distraction from talking about the real harm of VOG and violence against women and girls and where it's actually coming from.
Because this is all being framed as protecting women's spaces, wasn't
yeah,
it?
Yeah, 100%. So we were like, what can we do to really kind of draw people back down to this raw conversation that actually there's a whole bunch of us that don't agree with it. And when the Supreme Court ruling came out, there was a lot of kind of press and media that made it out like this was the win for all women, and this was the opinion of all women. And what we actually felt was that actually it's the voice of a minority of women, but we needed to prove that it was a minority in some way. So the letter was formed, it's an open letter, and we just kind of started to share it on social media and to ask people that if they also felt the same way, to sign that letter, with the aim of hoping, and at the time it was a dream, we talked about all kinds of numbers. At one point 50,000 felt like a big number, and then we were like, no, actually let's go 100,000, with this aim of our initial target. And I want to make that really clear that it was an initial target of let's see if we can reach 100,000 signatures of everyday ordinary women, cis non-trans women, saying this is not in our name. This messaging of trans women invading women's spaces is not in our name, and we do not agree with it.
Yeah.
And yesterday on the anniversary, we hit that 100,000.
Yeah, amazing. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, what a day for it to happen.
Yeah.
A day when all the gender criticals were doing the tours of all the media studios, sort of, banging the drum and sort of saying, oh, nothing's been happening about it. It's been a year, and then there's this letter saying, well, actually, over 100,000 women are just saying, no, we're quite happy to be inclusive of trans women. Because have you ever used the ladies' loos and been next to a trans woman in another cubicle, Emma? Has that ever happened? And did anything bad happen?
I mean, it's probably happened, but I wouldn't have known whether it was happening
Yeah.
or
So
not.
so nothing bad happened then.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's just like it's all this made up fear mongering, isn't it? It really is.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, I suppose I can be quite masculine presenting. And actually, in a lot of this conversation, there is a fear for me that at some point someone's going to turn around and question whether I have a right to be in the spaces that I'm in.
What,
And how will that impact me if I've got my daughter with me?
yeah.
How would that impact her and her safety in those situations? And it's kind
That
of,
that's happening a lot. I've
yeah,
got lots of friends who are much more masculine,
yeah,
cisgender, so non-trans women who are more masculine presenting, and they're getting questioned when they're using female spaces now as well. And so they're really, I think actually, because there's more of them than there are of trans women anyway, I think they're the ones that are really going to get it more now, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, it's not happened yet, but definitely if I've been to the barbers and I've had a fresh shave, I do feel more eyes on me when I'm washing my hands at the basin than
Really.
maybe I normally would.
Yeah, that's a shame. And let's go to Jackie. So, bringing, I don't want to ignore you, Jackie. So,
You have no problem.
so Jackie, why was it important for you to join this campaign?
So I am a parent of an adult trans child or adult trans person, and I've been involved with other initiatives and worked with an ambassador for the charity Flag, which is a group that supports parents. And we were doing our thing, but obviously as parents, we have a particular voice. And then a friend, actually a trans woman friend that I have, directed me towards this group and said, I think you should get involved with this, because she knew I just wanted to be able to do more. And yeah, so I got involved not long, just after a few weeks, I think, after it had started.
Mm,
And it's obviously important to me because it affects me very deeply with my child, but also, through those years, got to know a lot of people, have a lot of trans friends. And it's just so frustrating and so wrong because it doesn't affect people. When you're just talking there about toilets, I was saying to a friend just yesterday, every single time I go in a public toilet, particularly at service stations, we were traveling last week, and every time I think about it and look around and go, nobody cares.
no,
But
you're,
I actually get quite anxious, not because of
mm,
anybody necessarily
but
challenging me, and I'm not necessarily with my daughter, but it always makes me think about, well, the nonsense of all this, where most people are just minding their own business.
yeah,
Everybody is just minding their own
you,
business, in, out, go and
yeah,
buy a coffee kind of
and
thing. And so it just
yeah,
shows the nonsense of this kind of moral outrage and panic that's been created by
yeah,
people who, um, yeah, I've never really got to the full understanding of why people feel the way they do about this and why they want
yeah,
to pick on trans women. I know there's lots of theories. We don't have to go into all the reasons why it's ended up where we've
no.
ended up. And
And it's very
you know,
polarized as well, isn't it? And there's a lot
yeah,
of
deeply,
there's
deeply.
a lot of extremes there. But this is where I really love this campaign because it cuts right through the middle, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm a straight cis woman, and I would argue that I paid little attention to anything that was going on in the queer space because I didn't have any reason to.
No.
I've got a few gay friends, but um, I know now from all the things I've done, all the things I've read, and the things that I've chosen to educate myself about, the things that go on. And I didn't have a bad opinion of anybody, but I didn't really understand all the things that were going on for people because it didn't affect me. And that is how most people are. As much as we want to believe that we're all, people can be compassionate and understanding of others, but we're all busy getting on with our own lives and we're dealing with the things we're all dealing with. And now more than ever, there's so many things for people to be dealing with. We don't necessarily always fully understand what's actually like for other people. And when you kind
No.
of dropped in it from a high height like I was, you kind of suddenly go, oh, okay. And you realise
Mm,
where you've had blind spots and not fully understood. So I
mm,
think being able to encourage cis, so non-trans women to express that they are supportive of trans women because they don't see them as a threat, and there's all these other things going on that they do and their own experiences. And daily on the news there's been something horrible this week, hasn't there, reported about a young woman. There's always things, and it's never trans women who are at the bottom of it.
But I have to say, I'm very scary though, Jackie.
Well, you're terrifying. Having met you, I think you're absolutely terrifying. So yeah, I think it's really good to be able to soften and make it kind of a curiosity and an open conversation to make people feel more comfortable. I mean, I'd never been on a protest march in my life before I went to my first Pride, and a Pride's not really a protest march, but I was there last year at the march that they set up 2 days after the Supreme Court ruling, and I went on my own on the train to London, turned up, had no idea. I mean, I've been to a couple of Pride and trans marches, but and some of my friends thought I was mad, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, this really matters, I'm going. Bought a ticket. I live up in the north of England, bought a ticket down, went, and it mattered to be there. And I was really glad I was there because it got no reporting on the news, and I wanted to be there and see what actually happened with my own eyes.
I mean, prior to my transition, I'd never been on any protest marches at all, and I don't want to be, I don't really want to be doing that. I just want to live my life and be happy because I love my life. It's all, the whole reason we transition isn't to be somebody else, or that we're not, or to gain access to women's space, or anything. It's not about. It's just about being happy and being yourself. Because for years, for 48 years, I was battling with gender dysphoria, and it was like two people battling themselves inside themselves, and then, all of a sudden now, when I finally admitted to myself I was trans and did something about it, I was finally able to live my truth, and it feels amazing. I love my life now, and I shouldn't have to, battle this out and to justify my existence all the time. And so often when I get invited onto the media, it's framed as a debate, and they have someone who's trans hostile that I'm up against, and I actually turn a lot down now because I think it isn't a debate. Being trans isn't a debate. It's my identity. It's who I am, and I should just be able to be left alone and enjoy life. But
I want to say, we're not sort of saying to people have to go on protest marches either. The point of this letter is to sort of show support in a very, very simple way, and we're not asking for anything else from anyone by signing the letter, but just to show that the volume of numbers are that people are supportive. And there are organisations out there that are being pushed into not supporting trans women, and they're now saying, well we want to. So like the WI and things will say, right, well, we're not going to be a WI group anymore if we can't.
Well, this is what's happening. So the WI they were then sort of forced into them having this trans hostile and trans exclusionary policy, and now a lot of the WI groups now are folding, aren't they? So because the committees are all saying, well, we're not going to be trans exclusionary because we've been inclusive for all these years. We're not going to do it, and so they've been folding. And
I think that was a really key thing about the NION letter, was that we just wanted to give space for people who wanted to say, that isn't in my name, I don't agree with that conversation, but they're not the kind of people who want to go and walk on a protest march or shout about it in any particular way on social media or whatever. My mum is 72. Hope she doesn't kill me for sharing how old she is, but she's 72. She's a church goer. Like, I'm an openly gay woman. I work in the LGBT sector. We've had our own journeys of acceptance between the two of us, but in that she does a lot of learning, or I will throw things in her direction and see, have you seen this? Have you seen that? What do you think about that? So that's what I did with the NION letter. I shared it in her direction and said, I hope you'll read and sign, which she did. And then the next level was, will you share it? And there were lots of questions as to whether she would share it with some of the voluntary groups that she works with, whether it was within one of her church groups. And I'd kind of mention it every now and again, and she still hadn't. 2 days before hitting that 100,000, she finally felt like she was able to share that in one of her WhatsApp groups. And I'm hopeful that some of those people have read it and shared it. But one of the offerings that I kind of put with that was that if anyone wants to have a continued conversation about this, then that's something that I or someone else from the NION collective could also come and do. And it's not a place where we will hold judgment over anyone, but just create a safe space to have that conversation and help people understand a bit deeper who may not fully understand the situation of the experiences of trans people, but also what impact it really could have if these proposed code measures come into play.
It's so worrying, it really is. But in my experience, most people are lovely people who don't want to offend. You know, it's just that most people haven't had the education. Most people haven't knowingly met a trans person. They will have done. They would have met loads, but they won't have always known that they were trans. Most people, are very worried about offending people because they're lovely people, but they just need a little bit of help in understanding, what it's all about. And I think we can give them that's a really good thing.
Definitely, one of the last conversations I had with my mum around it, and seeing as we've talked about bathrooms, was actually how it could even impact trans men, and the idea that a trans man could potentially be forced to use a women's toilet, and what's going to be more triggering to a woman who has faced abuse from a male. It's not going to be a trans woman standing next to her. It's going to be a man with a beard standing next to her. And, let's think about the impact of that, not just on trans men having to go into women's spaces, but then that further afield conversation around protecting women and girls and people's experiences and all those kinds of targeted conversations that gender critters might come into conversations with.
Absolutely. And so as well as your mum, you've got a daughter as well, haven't you? And so I believe we wanted her to be more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a 7-year-old daughter who, she's a daughter through adoption. She has 2 mums. She already very much lives in a differentiated space to many of her friends. But just she's at that age where she is understanding the world around her, understanding differences. And I don't want her to catch sight of a news article. I mean, my child is obsessed with reading and she will read anything. So if we're in Asda doing the weekly shop and she catches a headline about trans women being unsafe, I don't want her to take that as rule. I want to have those open conversations with her and be able to say, well, yeah, there might be a couple of women who think this, but actually, look, mummy's part of this group of women where 100,000 other women have also said that we don't agree with that messaging, and to help her understand those nuances, those differences of people around her, and that everyone is beautiful and everyone has a right to be in spaces and to feel safe at the end of the day.
And certainly I found, the people who are trans hostile, generally there's a few women, but there's quite a lot of men who are. And generally I've actually found that the most supportive group of people are actually women and cisgender women, who've been most supportive. And so certainly when I was coming out, I came out 8 years ago, and when I was coming out, I was finding I was much more comfortable talking to other women about it. Because they reacted so much better and so much more inclusive. So it really does follow on that theme. So if other women want to sign the letter and to show their support, how do they go about that?
Yeah, so they simply have to head to notinourname.org. I think it is. Oh my goodness, my brain went completely blank then.
I'll put the website up on the screen.
We've hit that initial, and like I said before, we've hit that initial target of 100,000, but we're certainly not stopping. That is not the end. We want to continue to collect those signatures of people.
Yeah.
We want to be able to use the information that we're collecting through that to be able to have conversations with a wider spectrum of people to say, this isn't just 100,000, this is 100,000 plus. And those plus are still coming day in, day out. We're at 700 above that 100,000
in one day.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's 11:39 now, and we're 730 odd something above that 100,000 that we hit yesterday. So it's continuing to get that message out there.
It's absolutely amazing.
And to continue to get those signatures, just to hopefully also bring hope to the trans community that you can see that it isn't the majority who feel this way.
What an achievement. And I just like to say a huge thank you on behalf of me and from my trans friends, because what you and your friends are doing means so much to us, and it does make a big difference. So thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. I think the other thing to say, Emma touched on it a little bit, is about people being, and you said about people generally being nice but not knowing what to say. For me, it's also about trying to create a space where people can ask questions and make mistakes and not be berated for that. You know, I do a lot of talks with Flag. I talk to a lot of people just in general in my community, and people will say things, and they could be the wrong things, but they don't know that, and they're not saying it from a place. They're saying it from a place of good faith, not from being cruel. And they're not going to know any different unless people explain it to them in a soft and gentle way, so they can kind of go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Because I've had to go through that process of understanding, and you know, I like to think that the NION Women's Space is somewhere that people can come in good faith, ask those questions and feel comfortable, and then that ripple effect of going out and sharing that with other people along, you know, alongside the letter as well, because obviously we want to do something with this to try to, you know, raise this profile with those who are in a position of influence, but also it's just that ripple effect in general society. We want people to then actually treat somebody better if they do happen upon a trans person and they realise that they're trans, to treat them how they would want to be treated themselves, and that ripple out, so that then, you know, your experience and other people's experience on a day-to-day basis is better.
Definitely. Well, you're making such a difference. So thank you both of you for joining me today. And once again, a huge congratulations. And to any women watching this, go to that website now and sign up.